Interesting story to start this video. As you know, I ask everybody I cross paths with, where did you hear about the last nonfiction book you bought? Or if I see someone reading at an airport or in a park, I rudely interrupt them. Excuse me, but what made you buy that book? By the way, the best spot to do that is at the lineup of people waiting to pay at a bookstore, shooting fish in a barrel. I can talk to as many as 20 book buyers in a matter of minutes. Now, all this may seem a tad odd, I'll concede, but it has truly provided me with invaluable learnings. For example, it's how I know that radio, despite what many think, is still a great way to market books. The word of mouth kicks every other demand creation vehicle's butt. The books on entrepreneurship, tech, leadership, and marketing benefit disproportionately from blogger coverage. That's a cool tidbit, isn't it? It's also where I learned that there's a new kid on the demand creation block. One that has come out of nowhere. As recently as 2 years ago, I almost never got this as an answer to my questions, but it's now, with certain demographics, quite a popular response. Podcast interviews. I did not see that coming. In fact, it still surprises me a bit. With the exception of Serial, most of my friends don't listen to podcasts at all. Too old, I guess. Plus, I don't hear many book marketing experts pushing authors to pursue opportunities in this space. But wow. Really fascinating how often book buyers, especially millennial book buyers, are telling me they heard about the book they're buying on a podcast. Podcast listenership numbers are bigger than you think and growing nicely. I've seen estimates that say 1 in 5 Americans 12 and up has listened to a podcast in the last month. 1 in 5, that's impressive. The popularity growth for sure is being driven by more and more people consuming the podcast on their phones or tablets. It's all about mobility. Podcast lovers take them in at the gym, on a walk, while they're doing chores, etc. You don't have to be at a computer anymore. You can listen while multitasking. That's big. But there's more at play here than just a growing user base. It's clear that a disproportionate percentage of podcast listeners are book buyers, physical and audio. When these people are listening to a podcast, they are choosing taking in information over listening to music. That may sound funny, but think about it. It's true. That person on the treadmill has two options. The exerciser who chooses information to be a learner, hey, that's likely a nonfiction book buyer. Plus, and this I've learned is ultra important, many podcast hosts bring that same trust factor to the table that bloggers do. The listeners get to know them, spend a lot of time with them, and the extra dimension of hearing their voices helps deepen their relationships. I've had several millennials tell me that they would buy each and every book their favorite podcast host recommends. That's incredible. Now you may be wondering, great, but are there podcasts in my field? In all likelihood, yes. I just Googled top knitting podcasts, all kinds of listings. Same for top homeschooling podcasts, top dog lovers podcasts, top small business podcasts. How many people are listening to all of these? Okay, that I don't know. Tough information to find. The podcast producers can get those numbers, not precisely the ballpark, but we normally can't. So like with blogs, we're forced to do some digging. Hello, Google. And the Ninja Outreach app I mentioned, check that thing out. You can find podcasts that do interviews on there very efficiently. Once you've found the appropriate podcast, ones recommended by others or top 20 lists, you're still tasked with getting on them. And of course, that's not easy. In fact, most of the biggies, Tim Ferriss's, NPR's many great ones, the aforementioned Freakonomics, etc., are really challenging to book. You've got a lot of competition, and we're back to that celebrity issue to some extent. But come on, if those podcasts are in your field, at least give them a shot. That said, for most authors, realistically, sites have to be set a bit lower. But again, because of tight demographic matches, a book-buying audience, and a trusted host, even niche, much less popular podcasts can truly impact your sales. As with bloggers, you pitch podcast producers and hosts through email, but for a good number of the big ones, you can find an address and send a physical kit, my preferred method. With the email pitch, you are back to our radio tips. You're pitching yourself, not your book. Clearly, you'll be talking about your book because it captures your perspectives on the subject matter at hand, and that will be woven into your pitch. But what they really need to be convinced of is your ability to hold the audience, to articulate your views in an entertaining and compelling way, strong command of the language, short, punchy examples. Go back and watch the videos on creating your radio pitch and kit. That advice holds here. Your pitches provided sample questions need to be exceptionally well done. If the producer finds the questions intriguing, wants to know the answers, the battle is 3/4 won. And I'm sure you've guessed where I'm going next. Include the radio producer's endorsement, such an important tool here. And if you get on a well-known podcast, get a quote from that producer or host in your pitches immediately. Nothing works better, nothing. Almost finished. Most podcast interviews are done over Skype. Make sure you have a strong internet connection and a good headpiece mic, no background noise, have water there, the reference materials I mentioned in the radio videos. Listen to a few of the host podcasts before you're taping. Send your thank you notes out. Do all the little things well. Hey, in essence, this is radio interviews online, but often with tighter matches to your demographic audience and really trusted hosts. That combo seems to be making up for the usually much smaller audiences. And here's my last point, but it's a crucial one. I am convinced that podcast listening book buyers are truly fantastic word of mouthers. I'm basing that purely on anecdotal evidence, but a lot of it. A weird number of them seem to love sharing their book discoveries with others, which is great because if they're passionate enough to be listening to podcasts in a certain subject area, logically, they're also usually plugged into that space's online communities, chat rooms, forums, and social media platforms. Done. Finally, we're going to look at author websites. I'm shaking my head for good reason. Actually, good reasons.